Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm glad I didn't say good morning. I had to write down good afternoon because we're usually here in the morning. Sorry for the little bit of technical difficulties we had, but thank you for dealing with that today. We are so excited to have you here for, I think, what is our last holiday Zoom for the high holidays that we have for you. And we are really excited to start our fall and winter session that we have planned. You saw one of them coming up that we put in the coming up events. Which will be October 20th, the Tel Aviv graffiti tour, which is going to be something splashy and spectacular that we're really excited about. And we will send out more information on that. But before we do that, we are excited for today. I wanted to give a brief introduction on Gadi, who will be leading us this morning. Gadi was born in the United States in New York City, moved to Israel at a very young age to kibbutz Gesher Haziv in the north of Israel. He grew up on the kibbutz, and after completing his high school and Israeli military service, he moved right here to Baltimore, Maryland. He studied at the University of Maryland. He lived in the United States for 10 years and eventually moved back to Israel in 2005. He became a licensed tour guide in 2007 and has guided many groups in Israel as well as Europe. He loved the land and especially the people of Israel and has given him insight into his country that he shares with every visitor. Gadi is married to Amy. They live in Modi'in in the center of Israel, and they have two wonderful children, ages 10 and 12. Gadi, we are very excited to have you here today to walk us through the holiday of Sukkot, and we would like you to take it away. For everybody that is here today, though, just really fast before you start, Gadi, Adi is currently still in Israel. You know, she has been there for a while. She did 2 weeks in quarantine, and right after that ended, she jumped into 3 weeks of lockdown. She will be staying on after just to have a chat, to talk a little bit for anybody who wants to stay on and hear from Adi after Gadi's conversation. We would love to have you stay on, ask any questions to Adi. So if you want to stay on after Gadi's talk, please do. Don't hang up right away. We would love to just have a little chat with you. So now, Gadi, I am going to spotlight you and take it away on Sukkot. No, that's not what I wanted to do.
It's okay. No, you did, I think.
I did?
Maybe.
Adi?
Well, I'm going to share screen, so that should
Fix
be
it.
okay. If you spotlighted me, it should be okay.
Okay.
Yeah, that should work. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Shalom, everyone. I hope everyone's doing okay. I can talk English with an Israeli accent also to give you the full effect, but I'll spare that from you today. Can you guys see my screen? We're okay? Give me a thumbs up. Excellent. So I'm really excited about this opportunity to speak to all of you. As Karen mentioned, I lived in Baltimore for 5 years. My mom is originally from Baltimore. She lived on Reisterstown Road, the corner of North Avenue and Reisterstown Road. And I was there about 20 years ago, and I said, Mom, take me to where you grew up. And she said, I don't think we necessarily want to drive down there right now. But we drove by and she showed me where she grew up, and it's exciting for me to be part of the Baltimore community. And when I met with Karen and Adi, I mentioned that I'm doing something about Sukkot, and I hope that you'll enjoy this. I'm assuming that people know a little bit about Sukkot, so I won't delve into the basics. My wife, Amy, who's also from the United States originally, we had a program for kids, a couple on Sunday for 2 synagogues and we decorated the Sukkah. It was a lot of fun. So I'm not going to put you guys through that. We're going to talk a little bit about the tachlis, about the actual story of Sukkot. So we're at one of the points that we believe that the story of Sukkot started. So as you may know, the story of Sukkot starts in the desert by Mount Sinai. So we're actually on Mount Sinai, which is a misnomer because we don't actually know where Mount Sinai is. We're standing at the top of a place called Har Karkom, or Mount Karkom, which is right on the border between Egypt and Israel. And it's believed by some archaeologists as the actual location of Mount Sinai. There are 3 different locations of where we believe this place is. But imagine Moses standing up here, receiving the Torah, the 10 Commandments from God. And down below here are hundreds, if not thousands, of Sukkot, of temporary dwellings, booths, tabernacle, as they're called in English. And this is where the idea of Sukkot starts from. And we're in fact told in the Torah that we should sit in the Sukkah, Sukkot teshvu shiv'at yamim. You should spend 7 days in the Sukkah. Why? To remind us, to remember that this is what our ancestors went through before they received the word of God at Mount Sinai, at Har Sinai. So as you know, there are plenty of other holidays that talk about memory. Memory is a very, very important element in the Jewish tradition. So not only do we tell the story of Yetziat Mitzrayim and Pesach, the Exodus from Egypt, right? The main idea of Pesach is not to have a lot of food and to drink a lot of wine. That's a good idea too. But the idea there is to tell our children about what God did for us, getting us out of Egypt. And on the way, we want to remember as well that we sat in the Sukkah. So this is where it all started, but we're not going to build a Sukkah over here. We're going to get a little bit closer and go into the land of Israel. And we're going to start in a place called Neot Kedumim. Neot Kedumim is one of my favorite places in Israel. It's a biblical park. If you've been to Israel, I hope you visited here. A guy named Noga Reuveni in the 1950s spoke to David Ben-Gurion, the prime minister, first prime minister of Israel, and said to him, you know, the people today have no idea what the land looked like when our ancestors came into it in the biblical times. And he asked for a piece of land and got it for a park called Neot Kedumim, the dwelling of the ancients, or the beginnings of the fountain of ancient, of Kedumim, of Kadum. And what they did here is recreated the landscape of the Bible. So they got lots of cool activities. You can see here that we're learning how to herd a herd of sheep from one spot to the other. And trust me, it's not an easy thing to do. That's one of the activities. You can, they've recreated how to press olives to make olive oil, and wine presses, and all kinds of activities and landscapes that existed during the biblical times. And why am I mentioning all this on Sukkot? Because on Sukkot, they have what they call the Sukkot extravaganza. And the park is transformed into different Sukkot. So take a look at this one, for example, 2-story Sukkah. I wonder if the kids are fighting about who's going to be in the top bunk. And then we have literally, they try to be as close as possible to what the Sukkah would have looked like back in the day before the day when we were wandering in the desert. Here's some more of these Sukkot, different types. And they get a little creative. Yes, you are seeing correctly. That is a Sukkah on a boat. And of course, some of you are saying, why would you even need a Sukkah on a boat? Well, imagine people that live on a big river and need to continue to flow down the river. Maybe they live on a houseboat. So a Sukkah on a boat is kosher and appropriate. And of course, they also have camels, and they make a Sukkah on a camel. Here's a slightly better version of a Sukkah on a camel. And it's just a kind of an interesting idea, but Sukkot can be made in every shape, way, and form. as long as they have at least 3 walls, which means that this sukkah is not kosher, even though it's kind of funky on a camel. And it needs to have schach, some kind of covering where you can see the sky, but it needs to provide more shade than sun. And that's about it. As long as it's a temporary dwelling where we can live, and we'll see Jerusalem soon. We'll walk around Jerusalem and see some of the sites. So from here, we'll make our way up to the city of Jerusalem. And as you know, I'll mention this soon, the idea of Sukkot is one of the 3 pilgrimage holidays of the Jewish tradition. During that pilgrimage, and in Hebrew it's called a aliyah l'regel. If I translate those words, it's an ascension by foot, the direct translation. And aliyah l'regel is done on 3 holidays: Sukkot, Passover, Pesach, and Shavuot, where our people are told to come to Jerusalem, to the temple, 3 times a year. And these pilgrimage holidays are long holidays. Sukkot is a week. Pesach is also a week. Shavuot, not so much, so we'll keep that as an exception. But why are they a week long? There are no other holidays that are that long, except for Hanukkah, where there's 8 days, but for a different reason altogether. The reason is because it would take time for people to get from all around the Jewish world to Jerusalem, do what they're supposed to do during the pilgrimage holiday, and then come back to where they live. So a very interesting idea that comes from an archaeologist that I think, his name is Adam Zartal. He's a very interesting guy. He analyzed the words of the holiday, and he said aliyah l'regel, or ascending by foot. And the word chag, we use in Hebrew the word chag. Chag is a holiday, but if you look at the word, it also means going around in circles. In modern Hebrew, when your aircraft is going around the airport, going to land, it's called, the aircraft is chag around the airport. In addition to that, when we have a holiday, a chagiga, a celebration, it literally means that we have dancing around in circles. So he looked at this and he said, something sort of weird, because in Hebrew we don't use these words that way anymore. And he also saw that in the Bible it says, every place your foot will step, it will become yours. In addition to that, I brought here a translation of the 3 times a year. This is in the book of Exodus, telling us that 3 times a year we should go up to Jerusalem, and that is on Pesach, Sukkot, and Shavuot. So Adam Zartal had a very interesting theory. He did a whole examination of the area of the Jordan River Valley, and he found something fascinating, in my personal opinion. I hope you all will think it's interesting as well. He found footmarks, literally, places. There are about 10 of these around the Jordan River Valley, up on the hills of Samaria as well. And these are basically places where his idea is that our people, when it says aliyah l'regel, the pilgrimage, would not mean pilgrimage by foot, but rather literally a pilgrimage to the foot. And what you see here is an interesting place. It's by Moshav Argaman. Whoops, what just happened? I'll zoom out a bit. You can see the outline of it. It literally looks like a footprint, okay? The heel over here. And in the middle, there's some kind of elevated area with a mizbech, with an altar. And what Adam Zartal suggests is that before we had Jerusalem and the temple and all of that, when our people crossed from the other side of the Jordan River in the country of Jordan of today, after wandering in the desert, they enter into the land, and the land is divided to the 12 tribes. They had these locations that were literally a foot. And when they did a pilgrimage, they would come to the foot, aliyah la regel. Here's another one of these locations, and you can literally see an outline of the foot. It's a theory. We don't know for sure, but it's an interesting theory. If you look over here, you can see that there's sort of an entryway and a passage, sort of a way that people could walk around in circles and encircle around this central area where they could give their offering to the priests. And that's an interesting idea of the word chag, circling, and the interesting idea of the word regel, or foot. So we don't have actual evidence for this, but this is an interesting find. There's no other way to interpret these 10 locations that have a shape of a foot on them. So I think it's pretty cool. Whether or not that's really the reason of the holiday of Aliyah LaRegel, or a holiday, we don't actually know. But I want to show you one of these neighborhoods in Jerusalem, and actually I'm going to switch to a different presentation that I used as well. We're walking around a neighborhood in Jerusalem, and as you can see, people started putting up their Sukkot. You can see that these guys didn't even have a big enough balcony, so they put some extra stuff here to be able to sit in a sukkah. Here's some more of these balconies, and literally people on these holidays, on Sukkot, create their sukkah all around. Maybe this building that some of the folks didn't have a spot for sukkah, they would build it here in the parking area instead during the month of Sukkot, during the week of Sukkot. And it's interesting because in Israel, one of the listings of how expensive or how the features of your apartment is something called a sukkah-able balcony, mirpeset sukkah. So these guys, for example, they don't have a sukkah balcony because you have another balcony above them. So the apartment at the top would be more expensive because these folks can actually build their own sukkah, and you see it has 3 walls, even though it's using one of the walls of the building. So sort of an interesting feature, and when today any house or building that's built in Israel has that added feature, and it says mirpeset sukkah, sukkah balcony, makes the real estate more expensive. Here's a picture from Mea Shearim, another one of the neighborhoods nearby. And of course, we're told to live for 7 days in the sukkah. So people literally move out and live there. I know in Baltimore, it's maybe not that cold yet in mid-October, but I guess around Boston could be quite cold to live out in the sukkah. Believe it or not, here in Israel, tomorrow is going to be 95 degrees where I live. It's still nice and warm. So it is feasible to live in the sukkah, but you see people bring electricity, everything they would need in order to live in the sukkah. Here's a picture that I dubbed Sukkah City. Look at the amount of Sukkot over here, lots of stuff. My in-laws, by the way, live in a building with 7 or 8 different families. It's a 7 or 8 floors, I'm sorry, in the building. They're in the bottom floor with a big yard. And during Sukkot, they allow their neighbors that don't have a sukkah balcony to use their yard to build their own sukkah. So there's literally about 10 or 11 different sukkot that are built in their yard. They have an extension cord. They pay a very hefty electric bill during the week of Sukkot because everyone has their sukkah. And of course, some people who can't create their own sukkah can build a sukkah. This is kosher, by the way, totally acceptable, even though it's on wheels. And Chabad drive around in the neighborhood to make sure that anyone who doesn't have a sukkah has the ability to lekayem mitzvat sukkah, can use their sukkah. And one of the features of the holiday is, of course, going to the market. And this is my favorite market in Jerusalem, Machane Yehuda Market. If you've been to Israel, you've probably visited here. This is a Friday at about midday. And how do I know it's Friday? Because the soldiers are here on leave for Shabbat. There's some, these pink hats are probably a birthright group. And you can see some of the locals walking around. Obviously, this is not the way it looks today, unfortunately, because of the COVID and the lockdown. The market is not open. But every year there's a pop-up section, like a pop-up store, which are very in fashion today, or like a food truck that appears out of nowhere, of a Arba Minim, the 4 species market. And you can see these guys are examining the etrog or esrog. The etrog needs to be perfect without any blemishes. By the way, they start out green. You see these guys are on their way to becoming yellow. Throughout the week, they start getting yellow and becoming more ripe. And of course, another element that's important over there in the market is the schach, one of my favorite words in Hebrew that I'm sure for American Jews is a very difficult one and has too many in there. So this is schach, which by the way comes from the same word as sukkah. The idea is that it provides a shelter, a covering for us. Sukkah, schach is what we put up at the top. And this is part of the market as well that lots of people can buy when they come there. Also, here's a family in Mea Shearim putting up their sukkah. And of course, the lulav is another element. The 4 species, the etrog, lulav, which is part of the heart of the palm tree, and the willow, arava, and myrtle, hadas. And finally, one of the most exciting places in Machane Yehuda market that I like to bring my tourists to is this guy, Uzi Eli. He's a Yemenite Jew, and he's got a stall in the market where he uses etrog all year round to make all kinds of lotions and potions and things that are wonderful for you, as well as different juices. And during the break that we had between lockdowns, because we had one in April, May, and now we're in another one, my wife Amy, who's also a tour guide, and her friend Arava went up to talk to Uzieli on a Thursday. By the way, the market should have been extremely busy on a Thursday afternoon, but you can see very little people. Uzi had time to talk to them, and let's see what he told us about the etrogim. So the sound is not great, but there's subtitles so you can understand the story. Oh, let's start from the beginning for some reason. Hold on. Okay.
The etrog is good for the Sukkot, to love. It would make the food smell. It's healthy. It's good for practicing. It's good for the medicine. It's for beverage. It's holy fruits that put less on it to remain for a long time. It becomes smaller and drier. But this is the season of Sukkot for the etrog.
This is etrog spray.
30 pounds.
Almost 30 pounds of etrog in that little bottle.
Ready? Perfect.
Of course, he believes in his own products.
You become younger and healthy.
That's how you say so young. Uzi.
How did you get into this business?
It's family tradition from the grandfather. This is my father and
He's
mother.
pointing at pictures of his family in there.
Children.
Immigrated from Yemen.
And the 4th generation of making health of the nation.
And that's his son, O, who's also already in the family business.
Very energizing.
Hi, Shana Tova.
Very good. So thank you, Uzi Eli. Next time you come to Jerusalem, you're definitely going to go to Machane Yehuda, and you should check out Uzi Eli and the etrog man over there. Very good. So the idea of the 4 species and the market and the way Jerusalem looks like, or actually, even if I go out on the street here in Modi'in, in the town that I live in, I'd say about 2/3 of the families have built a sukkah. It's something that even the secular Israelis would definitely do. It's a tradition. I grew up on a kibbutz where we definitely had our own Sukkot that we would build at home, but there was also the communal Sukkah that we would build for the entire kibbutz. 500 people sitting in one Sukkah. Imagine how many decorations and how you would need to do that. So let's continue our pilgrimage to the center of it all by the temple, the western wall, the Kotel HaMa'aravi. Here we are at the western wall. And look at this plaza. It's not that filled. This is relatively slow. This is not during Sukkot. Let's see what it looks like during the holiday. So of course, this is, tour guides use BC and AD as 325 AD or 2000 BC. We have a new terminology, BC and AC, and BC stands for before COVID, and AC stands for after COVID. So obviously nowadays we're at, this is from BC, before COVID, but you can see these folks with the lulavim and the four Arba Minim, the etrog and everything. And look at the how filled this place becomes during the pilgrimage holiday, because in the past, our ancestors would come to Jerusalem 3 times a year on Sukkot, Pesach, and Shavuot. And today, the tradition continues. So on Sukkot, on the normal year, the old city is completely filled. People come from all over the world, literally. I know that many Jews that live outside of Israel come to stay for the holidays. It's a very exciting time to be here. And this particular picture was taken, you can see, by the way, the Sukkah over here. You see the little Sukkah for those who want to pray in the Sukkah as well by the Israeli flag. But this particular picture is from something called Birkat HaKohanim, the blessing of the priests. And during the time when the temple still stood in Jerusalem, the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, and when I say priest, by the way, I'm not talking about the Catholic priest in the Catholic Church. I'm talking about the Kohen, Mr. Cohen, that used to be at the temple. The high priest, the Kohen Gadol, would come out and bless all of the people in a blessing that I want to talk about in a moment. I'll recite it in Hebrew, and in fact, I have it here for you guys to see. No, maybe I don't. Hold on. Technical difficulties. I thought I put this here. Here we go. This blessing, I have it translated in English as well. And I'm sure you've heard it before. Yevarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha, Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'yichuneka, Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. May God bless you and protect you. May God shine his light upon you and give you peace. And this is the blessing that the high priest would say to the people by the temple every Sukkot. And even today, it's a big event where thousands of people come together for the blessing. And I have a recording from one of my colleagues, Tzachi Shaked, who filmed this in 2015. You'll hear the head rabbi of Israel, Rav Rashi L'Israel, giving the blessing to all of the people who are coming together for this blessing. We're not going to hear all of it, but I'll give you a taste. By the way, one of the only times of the year that a loudspeaker is allowed to be used in the Western Wall area. So the head rabbi is saying a prayer. Everyone is repeating after him. Very good. So we're not going to watch the whole thing. I saw a question, can you order the etrog lotion online? That's an interesting question. I don't know the answer to it. I'm assuming that the answer is yes. I'll look it up, and if it's possible, I'll send the link to Karen and she can distribute to everyone. Very good. So that is the Birkat HaKohanim at the temple. Here's another picture of what it looks like at the old Western Wall Plaza. Now, I don't know if you know this, but if you can do this with your fingers, I can't, because I'm not from the Kohen family. But if you can do this, they say that you're from the Kohen family, that you're a Kohen. And when the priest would bless the people, they would hold their hands up like this. In fact, in the Middle Ages in Europe, we see plenty tombstones of Mishpachat Kohen, someone from the Kohen family, that has this symbol on the tombstone. And this is the symbol of the Kohanim. And of course, I'm sure you know who these characters are, because Leonard Nimoy, in one of his interviews, Mr. Spock actually said that he knew about this, and he thought it would be very cool to add this in Star Trek. And of course, my favorite show, the Big Bang Theory, Mr. Sheldon here. So this has become part of culture, not necessarily our culture. Now, the Birkat HaKohanim goes back so far in our history that we actually found archaeological evidence with that blessing in Hebrew that was used by Kohanim, by the priests, in a place called Ketef Hinnom. It's in Jerusalem. If you know where the Montefiore windmill is, right outside of Jaffa Gate, it's literally below that. Excavations that were done there found a set of tombs of Kohanim, a very important priest family. And what was found there is, I think, incredible. This, by the way, is Gabi Barkai, one of my professors when I learned how to be a tour guide. So let's listen. We'll see a couple minutes of this about the most ancient script that was found in the land. And not only was it ancient script, it was the Birkat HaKohanim that we just heard and recited. Whoops, here we go. So the most interesting thing that they found was, oh, now you can't hear me. It was these special pendants that were found. They were taken to the Israel Museum lab, and they found the writing that we just saw. As soon as we opened up those scrolls, essentially it was like aluminum foil made of silver. And Gabi Barkai, the archaeologist, could see that they're covered with Hebrew writing. And it was really exciting. But then when I looked at what the Hebrew writing was, I realized that it was the priestly blessing from the book of Numbers. Here we are. So the book of Numbers, chapter 6, verse 24. These are the most ancient psukim, most ancient writing that were found 2,000 years ago. And it's even more ancient than the oldest version of the Torah that we found up until now, which is in the Dead Sea Scrolls in Qumran. Very good. So when they found this, they were really surprised to understand that these are essentially, I can't really call them scrolls. It was a pendant. It was really, really small on a very thin sheet of silver. And here you can see the ancient Hebrew that is written on it. I can't read it. I don't know if Adi can read ancient Hebrew. I'm assuming no, because the first temple period, King David, Solomon, and the kings that came after used this kind of writing. And later on, we've adapted what we call the Phoenician or the different type of writing, which is very similar to what we have today. The Dead Sea Scrolls, just as a comparison, from the Second Temple period, about 2,000 years ago, remember this is estimated 2,600 years ago, are written like this with the block letters. And if you come to the Dead Sea Scrolls, to the Shrine of the Book in the Israel Museum, my son, who's 10 years old and is in 5th grade, can walk up to those scrolls and read the Hebrew that's on there. So pretty amazing. And if you look at the translation here, you can literally find pieces of the blessing, Yishmerecha, Ya'er, Adonai, Panav, Elecha, V'yasem lecha shalom. Pretty incredible, in my opinion, that 2,600 years ago, and probably even before that, our people would use this same blessing that the head rabbi of Israel gives to the people today. And by the way, it's the same blessing that every family uses on Shabbat. We do this in our family. And my wife and I bless our children, our daughter and son, every Friday night with this same blessing. May God protect you, and may God keep you safe, and may God shine his light on you and give you peace. So all of this happens on Sukkot in this area by the Western Wall. Now, what is the Western Wall in general? So I wanted to jump over to the Israel Museum to see a model of Jerusalem during the Second Temple period. And what you see here is the southern wall of a platform that King Herod builds 2,000 years ago. I won't get into it too much because we could spend all evening talking just about that. But you can see this huge platform over here. The temple is the building in the middle. Nowadays, we have nothing left of the temple. Instead of the temple, today stands the Dome of the Rock, the Golden Dome, which is a Muslim shrine. And basically, the Western Wall is the western part of these retaining walls. We're going to walk around the model just a sec. You guys are literally walking with me at the Israel Museum in Jerusalem to see the rest of the area of the Western Wall. And we're going to zoom in a minute. You're going to be able to see that we saw the southern wall over here and the steps leading up to the temple. And the western wall is this area over here. You see this little arch here, it's called Robinson's Arch. We actually have a tiny little bit of it that was found and is still there. And where you pray today is basically this area of the western wall. And as you can see in the model, the wall actually continues all the way, another extension of the wall. What we see today is only about 1/10 of the actual wall of the temple. And maybe you've heard of the Western Wall tunnels tour that people can take, which are underneath the old city of today along the walls that we can see over here. Excellent. So that's the Western Wall, just to give us an understanding of where we are. And the next thing that I want to point out, when our people would come to Jerusalem, to the temple, besides the blessing of the Kohen Gadol, the Birkat HaKohanim, the people would also come here to the southern steps. This is excavated, and we found the actual steps that you can see over here. These are the real steps. These are already remade, but these steps still exist today. And as people would go up to the temple with their offering, they would be standing here, walking up and singing a song. The song they would sing, I'll tell you about it in a moment, but what I wanted to show you is the entrances that are still here that would lead us underneath the building that was here during the time of the temple and bring us up to the platform where the temple used to stand. So if we zoom in here a little bit, you can see a little bit of the lintel over here. You see there's an entrance. There's a picture here that brings you even closer. This is 2,000 years old from the entrance that used to be there when the temple existed. And farther along the wall, you can see 3 arches, 3 entrances. Here, I'll bring you a little closer so you can see it. And these, if we took away these building blocks that were put there by the Ottoman Turks about 400 years ago when they built the walls of the old city of Jerusalem today, we would go through those same tunnels that still exist today from 2,000 years ago and find ourselves up at the top of the platform and to the temple itself. Now, what song were we singing when we were here? We would sing a song called Shir HaMa'alot. I'm a terrible singer, so I won't do this to you, but Shir HaMa'alot B'shuv Adonai et Shivat Zion. It's a song that we sing every Shabbat after Birkat HaMazon, the blessing for the food. And it literally means the song of ascent, or ma'alot in Hebrew is a fancy word for the word steps. And basically it says, when the Lord returned us from captivity, we are back here to celebrate and to worship God. And we come to pray at the temple to ask God to give us rain and to be nice to our crops so that we can sow our seeds and bring our offerings to God. And the next holiday, which is the holiday of Passover, we come on Sukkot to ask for rain. It's the beginning of the rainy season. Then we come on Passover, the beginning of the crops coming out of the ground, spring, literally springing out. And then we come back 7 weeks later, Shavuot, show and tell, we bring for God all of the offerings that we grew in our fields. So this song we still sing today, again, to connect us to the tradition from 2,000 years ago when our temple was still here. I think it's pretty cool. I hope all of you think it's pretty cool as well, because one more tradition that I want to talk about before we close this off is a holiday that most of us probably never heard of because we don't do much of it this year, this time, because we're in the modern era. The holiday I want to talk about is called Simchat Bet HaShoeva, the holiday of the water. Now, back in the day, before the day, we didn't have a tap in our house where it would open and the water would come flowing out. Today, we take it for granted. Back then, people would have water, especially in this part of the world. We would have water only from springs, or we would collect the water in what we would call a water cistern. There's no water brethren, by the way. Never mind. I'll try to work on my jokes. But the water cistern is a huge, imagine that this entire area underground is a big hole. The opening is over here, and in order to draw water that would collect during the rainy season in the winter, you would have a bucket, obviously not a plastic bucket, but some other way of throwing it down into the water and collecting it up. And in this land, it does not rain in the summer. So if you don't collect water during the rainy season, you are in terrible condition when the summer arrives, and you hope that your water will actually last for the entire summer season. In fact, at the end of the holiday of Sukkot, we start the reading of the Torah portions once again. We have a holiday called Simchat Torah. And on Simchat Torah, by the way, what do we do when we carry the Torah? What is it called? Anybody remember? Hakafot. We run around in circles in the synagogue with the Torah. Remember the holiday Chag, that means circles, some way connecting to that as well. And during the last days of Sukkot, we switch our daily prayer to start asking for rain. because we know it's the rainy season and we want God to provide rain. So this holiday of Simchat Bet HaShoeva is an important holiday because during the time that the temple existed here, there was a spring in Jerusalem. This is an excavation that was done that shows us the walls of the city of Jerusalem and a spring that was protected by the walls. People could walk down to the spring to bring water safely without being attacked by any force that's putting a siege on Jerusalem. And we know that there was a guy named Hezekiah, one of the kings of Jerusalem, that built a tunnel to convert the water from the spring, an underground tunnel that brought it into the city to a place called the Pool of Siloam, or the Pool of Shiloach. If you've been to Jerusalem, you probably had a chance to go into this. And if you walked through this, and we fondly call it the Water Park of Jerusalem, because it's about a half an hour of walking in pitch dark. It's cold, it's fun in the summer. And you can see this group just came out of the tunnel into the Brechat HaShiloach, or the Pool of Siloam. And you can see they're all dressed, they're all wet with water shoes and so on. And we know that the tradition of the holiday of the water, the priests, the Kohanim, would come down to this area, to Brechat HaShiloach, the pool that was excavated from the time of the Second Temple, the time of the temple 2,000 years ago. It's also the time of Jesus, by the way. So the Christian world is very excited about this excavation as well. And from here, they would fill up the water and they would start walking up in a street. Here's another picture of the level I think I put in. They would start walking up in a street that again has been excavated. This is not open to the public yet. Next time you come to Israel, hopefully it will be. They would fill up containers of water, the priests, the Kohanim, and start walking up from the Pool of Siloam, from the Pool of Shiloach, all the way up to the temple. And the people would be dancing and singing behind them. The priests would come up to the altar in the temple and pour the water on the altar, on the Mizbeach. And the celebration was an offering for God of water, to ask God to provide us enough water during the rainy season that's about to come forward, and the celebration of the water. So nowadays it's celebrated in a very different way, but it's definitely a holiday, or part of the holiday that is celebrated during Sukkot as well. All right, that's it. I hope you guys didn't suffer too much and that people enjoyed this. Let's see, yes, the Gichon Spring, David, that's correct. Those are Sharei Hulda, yes. I didn't want to go into the names and explanation too much, but those gates that I showed that are blocked up by the building blocks from the Ottoman period are known as the Hulda gates. Hulda in Hebrew is a rat. Sort of a weird name for gates. So there's two explanations. One is that there was an important woman by the name of Hulda that was, her tomb was right by those gates. The other explanation is that perhaps when you walked through those tunnels, through those gates and under the building and up to the platform, you would feel like a rat in a tunnel. So those are the two reasons for the name of Sharei Hulda. What is the elevated feature on the Kotel Plaza? Susan, I'm not sure I understand the question. So if you want to unmute and ask, I'll be happy to answer that. Can you buy etrog chalva? Wow, interesting. I've never thought of that. Not that I've heard of, but you're right. Chalva Kingdom is another one of the great features of the Machane Yehuda market. So I have not seen that. I'm going to remove the spotlight so people can see me if you want. Interesting question about the elevated feature of the Kotel Plaza, and where are etrogim grown? So all around Israel, we have etrogim. In fact, a friend of mine goes to the States every year before Sukkot with Arba Minim. He sells it in Los Angeles and in New York. And I joined him not too long ago at his packing facility not too far from Modi'in. Etrog is a citrus, so just like any other, the famous Jaffa oranges that grow around this region, there's plenty of lemons, mandarins, clementine, oranges. So etrog is another one of those crops. Mind you, we don't eat etrog as much, so there's really, if you're growing them, it has to be for Sukkot, and it's a big business. A set of Arba Minim, the cheapest is usually around 100 shekels. That would be, let's say, $25. But it could go for hundreds of dollars if you have a big etrog or a fancy something that's big business. So it could definitely be something that people would invest in. The Mugrabi Bridge. Yeah, we saw the wooden walkway that leads up to the Mugrabi place. Lulavim, or product of. What does that mean? I'm not sure, Robin, that I understand. At any rate, can people unmute themselves if they want, Karen? Is that an option for them to? No. Okay.
It's I mean, if they want to raise their hand, if they know how to do that, Adi can unmute them and then they can ask a question. But with 80 people, 70 people, it gets kind of crazy.
Okay, fair enough. So I'm answering the questions in the chat. If you have more in the chat, feel free to do that. Joanne, I had a feeling you were going to be in this crowd. So here's something that, first of all, we have another tour, a couple, I think, scheduled with you guys.
Yeah.
I'm a tour guide, and as you can imagine, tours in Israel have come to a screeching halt. Not to mention that we can't walk around. We also don't have any tourists. So my wife and I, Amy, sort of reinvented ourselves by doing virtual tours. And we do every Wednesday, I do an Israel update of politics and COVID and lockdown and different archaeological finds and things that are going on in Israel. So everyone's welcome to join on Wednesday, 3 p.m. Eastern time. And we also offer all kinds of tours. So if I'll send it to Karen, if she feels it's something that she can send on to all of you, we'd be more than happy to do that. And we actually have a cohort of, I'd say, about 50 Israeli tour guides that we learn how to work together and organize things together so that we're all offering different tours and different things. Any other questions? Very good. Adi or Karen, anything to add or?
Yeah, I think it looks like we covered all the questions. Like Gadi said, we do have a few tours set up with Gadi in the next couple of weeks. So we're really excited about that. And we hope to see all of you there with us over Zoom, of course, in the next couple of weeks. That's just the way it has to be. But we are excited to have Gadi. We are going to be excited to have Gadi with us. This was wonderful. We really thank you for having us, for doing this for us. Very informative. As people said, it was great to see, Israel in the background, even though only virtual for us.